Okay, so we can start. So welcome to this Blue Horizon webinar series. So the title has been found by her. So thanks to her for this nice title. So today is really about something that is quite often missing in the blue economy development in many countries, is really about the people and the work conditions and everything around the way to improve not only the well-being of the people, but also to improve the social standards of the blue economy. So for this, we have 4 panelists today. We have Professor Leila Shukrum, who is professor at the University of Portsmouth in international law. She's also the director of the Democratic Citizen Interfaculty Research Team. We have Pascaline from I think from Senegal. I mean, located in Senegal at the moment. Okay, she's the founder and editor-in-chief of the Maritime Africa. Okay, and we have Bonnie Lin. Okay, executive director of Work Better Innovation, and Dr. Sophie Quentin, researcher at the CBG in maritime geopolitics and maritime security. So the way we'll present the thing is that I will allocate no more than 8 minutes to everybody. Okay, Leila cannot join us now because she's in India and she had difficulties to join, but apparently she record a video that we can present now. Okay, so I suggest we have the short presentation, and after we go to the questions and answer. Okay, so we start with Leila. Leila, the floor is yours.
Hello, dear colleagues and friends. I'd like to apologize. I can't make it today because I have multiple commitments. However, I would like to say a few words from an international law perspective. This is a really important seminar today. Women at Sea, Women with the Sea. The question of gender violence, gender-based violence, is indeed unique and deserves unique attention. It has hardly been studied in international law, international relations. But indeed, it's really, really particular. There's a question of jurisdiction, which international law and which law applies. Is it the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea? Is it the Maritime Convention? Is it domestic law? What sort of resources do we have to protect these women working at sea? So today you're going to hear from different perspectives: migration, indeed, women working in various industries, fisheries, the seafarers, the military as well. All these questions are particularly complex and extremely important because we see, and that's encouraging, a growing number of women working at sea. You'll be in good hands with 3 experts, Dr. Bonnie Lin, Dr. Sophie Quentin, and Pascaline Oduburu. We have recorded together a podcast a few months ago, which is available on Spotify and all platforms like Apple. It's called Your Rights in Action, and indeed Women at Sea. You can find that everywhere. I encourage you to listen to it if you want to go further, if you're interested indeed in the rules governing this question. I'd like to thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Leila. So, okay. So now that was brief, but that was good. Okay, so now we can move to our next speaker, which is Pascaline. So Pascaline, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. My presentation is entitled African Women in Maritime Sector, Role and Challenges. Today, women represent only 1.2% of the global seafarer workforce as per as the BINCO or ICS 2021 Seafarer Workforce Report. Although there are no overall statistics on the participation of African women in this industry, both in terms of the poor workforce and seafarers, it is undeniable that they occupy an important place, particularly in the port sector, where they play a crucial role, especially in administrative functions, first contributing to the growth and development of the organization. The role of African women in the maritime sector. Women have played and always played a role in this traditionally male-dominated industry. In Africa, they have been present for ages in ports, private shipping companies, and state institutions such as African Shippers Council, African Shipping Company, national maritime agencies, and even ministry in charge of maritime economy or transport. Today, they occupy various positions at different levels of the chain, whether executive, managerial, or operational. From crane operator to shipping company director, they play their part to the full at every level while making their own contribution. However, we are seeing a growing trend toward women taking up navigation-related jobs in positions such as deck watch officer, engineer officer of the watch, ship's captain, and many others, even if their number is still low. Some statistics on African women in the maritime sector by country. In Benin, of the 512 employees of the Port Autonome de Cotonou in 2021, only 82 were women, 60% of the staff. By 2022, the percentage of women at the Port Autonome de Cotonou had risen to 18%, with most women in administrative positions. In 2019, some 9.3% of Nigeria's seafarers were women. Only 16% of the Ghana Port and Harbor Authority entire staff is female. In 2017, the Tourist Port platform employed 783 agents, including 67 women, or about 9% of staff. Of this number, 49 women held positions of responsibility, or 75% in human resources. The Port Community Alliance for the Promotion of the Port of Lomé, the Medical Social Center, and the General Administration. In South Africa, an ISS article notes that 15 out of 17 marine pilots are women, or 21%. Some primary African maritime women. In Nigeria, Hadiza Bala Husman has been appointed as the first female managing director of the Nigerian Port Authority, and this appointment comes after 61 years of existence of NPA. In Benin, Pascaline Adjofogue is the first woman tugboat captain at the Port Autonome de Cotonou. And in Kenya, Elizabeth Marami is the first female mine pilot. The challenges facing African women in the maritime sector: we are intolerance, intimidation, sexism, low salary, sexual harassment, discrimination, professional segregation, malicious innuendo, lack of professional opportunity due to gender, slow advancement in their professional career, stereotyping by men and even sometimes from women, lack of opportunity to reach the highest position in the industry. Is it not that they have to make extra effort or even work twice as hard to move up in this sector? They are considered by their male counterparts as weaknesses in the company. Their intelligence and skill are questioned by their colleagues. Jurists and change their point of view, even their ideas are due to be no use, and when this is the case, their male counterparts transfer ideas in their favor to take credit for them. While they have to manage men, they have to show a high level of leadership, patience, and diplomacy to gain acceptance and trust from their subordinates. How to overcome these challenges? To overcome these challenges, we must organize awareness-raising campaign on equal opportunities and anti-discrimination in the maritime sector, implement and enforce zero-tolerance policies on discrimination, harassment, and sexism in maritime workplace with clear sanction for offender, adopt law and regulation that guarantee equal opportunity for women in recruitment, promotion, and access to management positions in the maritime sector. Also, implement gender quota or diversity targets to ensure equitable representation of women at all levels of the maritime industry in Africa. Implement initiatives to increase the representation of women in management and decision-making positions within maritime company organizations. We create professional support network exclusively for African women in the maritime sector, providing opportunity for networking, mentoring, and sharing experience. Organize events and conferences focusing on female leadership and the achievement of women in the African maritime sector to inspire them and promote their career advancement. Establish confidential and accessible reporting mechanisms for discrimination, harassment, and bullying in the workplace. Provide physical, and legal support to victims, including counseling service and protection resources. This recommendation is addressed to government, institutions, associations, and other stakeholders. In conclusion, it is undeniable that African women play a crucial role in maritime sector, despite the challenges they face. Their present, albeit modest, is increasing in the non-occupied key position, both in port and on ships. As set out in the Sustainable Development Goals, the presence of women in maritime workforce is a win-win situation. Like men, they play a vital role in the development of the maritime sector. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Pascaline. Thanks a lot, Pascaline. Okay. I don't know. I think Bonnie, you're the following one. No, next one. If I'm right. Or is it Sophie?
Yes.
Yeah, it's Bonnie. Okay.
Is
Bonnie,
it
can you-
me? I'm happy to share my screen now. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, the floor is yours.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody, and greetings from Taiwan, from Asia. I'm really thrilled to be here today to talk to you about women in the maritime and aquatic sectors. And I think my presentation fits really well with the one that was just presented by Pascaline. A lot of the themes that you mentioned also will come out in my presentation. It's too bad that Layla is not here today. She did speak to us by video, but I started with this slide because a lot of her work and that of my work and our collaboration has looked at forced labor in the maritime sector. She just gave a talk in India on this topic. And I think it is interesting, and I will also delve into this a bit in later part of my presentation, the extra vulnerabilities of women workforce in the maritime sector when we look at all the indicators that that we know of that could lead to forced labor situation. So this is where I think our presentation overlap a little bit. And it's basically the fact that when we speak of the people who are working in maritime, we're looking at a minority who are women workforce. So we know already that the 90% of the world's trade is done by sea. And we saw the importance of this during the pandemic when it was the maritime trade that kept the shops open. So that really came to light during the pandemic, that 90% of the world's trade is by maritime routes. We have 1.5 million seafarers who are working on these container ships, cruise ships, and very little women. So 2%, the statistics I have are point to 2% are women. Pascaline's presentation looked at something like just a little bit over 1%, but it's not high. And we know about these problems such as gender discrimination. And at the worst end, we have gender-based violence, the non-reporting also of sexual harassment, of these very serious assaults on a female seafarer. We know that this exists. So I want to point to a little bit about what is not known. So this is what is known, more or less. We speak a lot of fishers at sea, and there the lens is almost predominantly male. We have 30 million fishers in the global economy. It's estimated that about 20,000 are children. But what is not known, and I have not come across a reliable statistics, is the number of women fishers in this big 30 million population of fishers that are known to be predominantly men. And when we look at the forced labor risks that I spoke about in my first slide, issues of abandonment, isolation, wages that are not paid, or things like debt bondage, we know that women fishers are also very much at risk. I want to point to a little bit to this article. The headline really intrigued me. It says, "Women anchor global fishing, but they're not seen," right? So I want to delve into that a little bit for my presentation today, to look at the invisibility of the woman's work in the maritime sector, especially when we look at fishing and aquaculture. So the report by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations System, FAO, they're based in Rome. They came out with a report in 2022 that had some more statistics about the number of women who are in agriculture, who are in fishing. So I spoke about the numbers that we already know, 2% of women in the seafaring population. We know that there are about 30 million fishers, and that there are a lot more men who are recorded as being fishers than women. Now, the FAO report gave us a few more statistics that are very interesting. So one of them is the fact that out of the 113 million people working in small scale and subsistence fishing, about 45 million are women, and that's about 40%. So that is a lot that we don't know for a significant population that works in small scale and subsistence fishing. So in terms of agriculture, women are estimated to account for 70% of the total workforce. So in terms of the small scale and subsistence fishing, a lot of it could be coastal, a lot of it could be informal, a lot of it is fish that are sold in markets, given to neighbors, that is used to feed the family. But that is not seen, not recorded as statistics when we count economic activities. And I really want to highlight this, for the reason that there is a women policy gap when we looked at maritime governance, right? So I'm going a bit further from what Pascaline opened with, which is the fact that we're trying to get more women into the workforce, the maritime workforce. But how do we do that? With the majority of countries do not collect gender-specific data that properly reflects women's role in the maritime economy. So they're not seen. So this FAO report also points to the fact that because data is not collected in a gender-specific manner, women are largely unaccounted for in government schemes to provide assistance for the fishery or agriculture sectors. So things like pensions and social security benefits do not have, often do not focus on women. They're simply not seen. They're not there. Now, when we look at specific activities that I alluded to, which is catching of seafood in shallow coastal water in a process that's known by its more formal name called gleaning, it's caught by hand. We know that women carry out more of these activities than their male counterparts. I want to go back a little bit to forced labor indicators, what I alluded to in the beginning of my slides. There are 11 indicators of forced labor that was put out by the International Labor Organization about a decade ago. And we see that a lot of the indicators have, women are at heightened risk if we look at the one where the women are in the cage, that is to depict lack of freedom of movement, where their movement is being restricted. The next picture of the falcon lifting the woman away from the ground, well, that's physical sexual violence, and then you have intimidation and threats. So we can see that, there are extra vulnerabilities, and a lot of our work is focusing on the intersectionality of women's work, or better say, the invisibility of a woman's work in certain sectors that contribute to a heightened sense of a risk profile. A lot of the work that I work on is on debt bondage, where migrant workers pay a heavy debt to secure a job in another country, and they have to pay back this debt before their first day of work. We see that for the fishers, for instance, that their debt, their pay could be withheld owing to being away from the coastal state, right? So it makes it difficult for communication for that payment to be verified. And that, of course, has a ripple effect on the communities that they leave behind, spouses, their children who are working for that funds to be remitted. Now, Leila spoke about international law, and I want to go back to that point because the main international convention, the UN Convention on Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, it's actually very mute on people. So the only place where they talk about slaves is Article 99, only one article in this 300-page document. And it says that states should take effective measures to prohibit the transport of slaves. So the question I always ask is, well, what about the use of slaves at sea? So I just want to point out that we're working in an area of law where there was not supposed to be a maritime vacuum, but the effect of the application of law is so territorial based that we tend to look at land and we don't look at the sea. So a lot of problems persist at sea. So approaching my final conclusions, and I just want to say that I know we're talking about women's work in the maritime economy, but for me, so much of the problems that we're talking about has an echo in the domestic care sector. So the International Labor Organization has a convention 189 that deals with decent work in the domestic care sector. And there, the same problem persists, right? Because the woman's work in the domestic care is largely invisible. We see very low rates of ratification. So it has been signed since 2011. It entered into force more than a decade ago. And even now, we're looking at only 36 state ratifications. And there's a presumption that I think about always in the background, that women's work in certain sectors are kind of taken for granted and invisible, not counted in statistics, and therefore not eligible for government, help designed to help certain sectors. But things I think are slowly changing. I want to point to some developments in Asia. So ASEAN last year came out with a declaration on the placement and protection of migrant fishers. And in Article 3, it actually says, it talks about asking member states to take appropriate and gender responsive measures to identify, address, and punish all forms of violence and exploitation against migrant fishers. So I think that is an encouraging step to kind of bring us to think about, well, what are the challenges facing women workers in the maritime sectors? And the ASEAN Declaration is being picked up by a very vibrant Asian civil society initiative. I have here the image of a policy paper that was put out by the ASEAN People's Conference as kind of a way to, push on these intergovernmental efforts to improve the condition for all workers in maritime. And I just want to end on this final slide, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the bedrock human rights, instrument of our time. It does not set out a maritime vacuum. It applies at sea the way that it applies on land. But I think the challenge for all of us now, lawyers, practitioners, everyone, is to think about how do we eliminate the vacuums of application at sea, simply owing to the fact that it's far away and it's harder to see. Thank you so much for the presentation, for the chance to present, and I look forward to other panelists.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. Okay, Sophie,
Yes.
your turn.
Okay, thank you. Hey, can you put my slide up? That should be coming. Well, my presentation will be relatively short and more of a transition for us to start debating. And I'm going to use my international relations background to kind of contextualize what we are going to be discussing, hopefully in more details. So I'm going to make really a series of observations and then contextualize. So we have the ocean as a context for development. The policies have been set in place, and within those grand policies, we have obviously women. Gender equality put forward as a key objective. So that is the context. So the challenges, of course, are to implement these policies, these laws, in a way that is more equal around the world. And unfortunately, the context that we are working within, generally speaking, is one of systemic inequity. Generally speaking, the international relations context. The ocean economics, ocean development is massively, there are big disparities between the global north, the global south. All of these are being bridged, and I think the introduction of the blue economy concept and practice is certainly been a very welcoming or welcome introduction into that very complex global governance system. And so where do we women fit as that? Every day for me is Women's Day. Every day I'm very lucky to be here in the UK and to avail myself of all the rights should I need them. I've never really felt personally that that I was discriminated upon, but I can feel, and having worked in the security sector, I can feel the vulnerability of many areas in the global south. So what I'm trying to say here is that we have an incredibly complex existing framework of policies, international policies, policies at the national level, and the challenge for us is to implement those better. And I'd like to discuss further in the next section, obviously, my thoughts on how to go about this. But what the point I'm trying to make is that we're doing this within, we are trying to improve women's rights. We're trying to address many gaps in those rights within an international context, which and I'm using this this reference here of blue acceleration. The blue acceleration, the acceleration of geopolitical tensions worldwide, which are going to put stress on any endeavors that we are going to pursue in improving women's rights at sea, or improving human rights generally, to be honest, at sea. We are working in a context of climate change, which impacts women everywhere on coastal communities. And it's really important to bear this in mind, is that whatever we do is taking place again in a very complicated context. And finally, so as a way of transition, there is of course many challenges, but I also see the blue economy as an opportunity for women to basically shape their course into this into emerging economies in particular. Not to say that we don't have to do this here back in the global north, but so a balance of challenges with many opportunities as well, which we need to work on within the blue economy sector. And I think, generally speaking, a lot of positive to look forward to, while being mindful of the context that we are working with or working in, which is that of increased geopolitical tensions worldwide, which will impact everywhere. Just to mention, obviously, Ukraine, the Red Sea, which will have an impact, obviously, on the economies of Africa as well, and is already having an impact, given the importance of the maritime sector to African development. And in that rambling of mine, I will be very happy to discuss more in the discussions the security sector, which has made a lot of progress in integrating women. Navies, particularly, which play a fundamental role in the preservation of, in the policing of maritime jurisdictions worldwide. French Navy, to give a figure, has reached 19 or 16% female personnel. Feminization of many African navies is existing. It's progressing. That doesn't mean to say that there aren't any problems. There are problems back here in the UK with the integration of women within armed forces. There will be problem to come. So on these few words, I pass back the word to our chairperson, and I'm happy to discuss all of these issues. Thank you very much for the other panelists. Very interesting. I've taken some notes, so I'll be happy to prod you later.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sophie. Okay, so now it's time to, I think, to discussion and questions, and I will start with myself. Okay, so I have a question to the four panelists. I think it's about the first. I have two questions. In fact, the first one is about the research. What type of research should we carry on, you know, to better profile or better to show the role of women in the maritime sector, and to be able to do a better advocacy? That's the first things. And the second one is about and I think that's mainly from Pascaline presentation, because you mentioned a list of actions, but at the global policy level, what should be done in order to improve the situation, the current situation? So that's for all the panelists. So Pascaline, I start with you with the research and the global policy level action that we should carry on.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I will say it in French, so you will maybe better understand. J'ai deux questions. La première est sur la recherche. Tu vois, quel genre de recherche, quel type de recherche il faut faire pour mieux montrer les difficultés que l'on a que les femmes ont dans le domaine maritime, d'accord? Pour pouvoir faire justement de ce qu'on appelle du policy advocacy. Et le deuxième, c'est qu'est-ce qui doit être fait à un niveau plus global, un niveau politique plus global?
D'accord, mais serait-il possible que je puisse répondre en français et là tu pourras?
Okay, I will try. Or Sophie will do it. Sophie
Yes,
will
I'll
do
do
the
that, yes.
translation.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. Vas-y.
Ok, merci. Par rapport à la première question et tout, quel genre de recherche il faut faire? Je dirais qu'il faut faire une recherche globale, vu qu'il a plusieurs acteurs dans le secteur maritime. Genre, il a les marins, il a les gens au niveau des administrations, et il faudra faire une recherche qui prend en compte tous ces types de profils. Et par rapport à cela...
I'll translate straight away. So thank you very much for the question, Pierre. With regard to the first question on research, I believe that we should be doing global research.
Okay, thank you. Et par rapport à la deuxième question, quelles sont les actions qu'il faudrait que les gouvernements doivent mettre en place? Je pense que déjà l'OMI fait déjà plusieurs actions, parce que l'OMI a aidé à mettre en place le WIMOCA, qui est une association de femmes dans le secteur maritime en Afrique. Et par rapport à cela, je pense que on devrait continuer dans cette lancée-là, qui est d'accompagner les femmes à travers genre, des financements pour la mise en place de programmes de formation gratuite avec des universités maritimes internationales.
Okay.
With regard to the second question, I think to take the essence of what Pascaline is saying is that there are initiatives that are accompanying already programs such as the WIMOCA program for West Africa, and these are really basically important to continue, if I understand correctly, Pascaline.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Pascaline. Bonnie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre, for that question. Well, it's something I've been thinking about as well. And I think for me, what would be really interesting in terms of a piece of research is looking at, if we're looking at the intersectionality of what Sophie said, which is we are looking at climate change, and we know that ocean has such a fundamental role in climate science. I'm quite inspired actually by a conversation I had with an oceanographer. And she mentioned to me that due to climate change and the fact that, we have pockets of warming water, it's shifting fishing populations. And the fishing population, they might be moving more southward to spawn. And it's having a devastating impact on fishermen who has relied on their, traditional knowledge of knowing where to go and catching for feeding grounds. I would like to know exactly how is that affecting coastal communities, and are we seeing a disproportional larger impact of this being borne by women fishers? Like, for instance, if you're looking at things like gleaning, catching informally in the coastal waters and being sold to feed families, is there a correlation with things like, malnutrition? Are we seeing things like our kids being pulled out of school, because you need to catch more to feed the family? So I think as a development person, I'll be interested to see these things to kind of draw out some of the climate impacts that we know are already coming, but I suspect are already here today, but it's kind of happening under the radar a bit, and we don't have the full knowledge of the impact of that at the community level.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah. No, that's interesting. But this is already what we can observe in Africa. And by the way, the fish in the southern hemisphere is going down, and the one in the northern is going up. And it's about 20 kilometers per year that they are moving downwards or upwards. Yeah. So it's quite significant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sophie. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much, Bonnie. Very interesting point. This whole idea of focusing on the sector, maybe climate change and how it's impacting already very vulnerable coastal communities, for example, and within this coastal community, very vulnerable women who will be struggling even more within this context. With regard to the first question, Pierre, what I would say, what I have experienced myself with my research is that there are basically big vacuum of knowledge on some regions when it comes to specific topics, whether we are talking about fishing or the fishing industry, or quite simply the military sector, the navies of West Africa, for example. There simply aren't any studies. Nobody has taken a regional approach. There you will find, and I have done research, occasional papers on prostitution in the Gulf of Guinea, the vulnerability of women in this context, what can be done. But there isn't a regional approach, and a regional approach that would have a policy impact by having these put on agendas of regional organizations, of which there are many within the maritime sector. I take the point raised prior that the IMO by Pascaline has done a lot of work already. Perhaps more should be done, and certainly more regional research should be brought to bear to have more of an impact at the regional level, within whether we're talking about ECOWAS, international organization like the IMO and another forum. I mean, there's a multiplicity of fora really in some regions, but no studies about women basically.
Yeah, nice too. And that this is interesting because about 25 years ago, there was a lot of, we have been carrying on quite a lot of work on women in fisheries in Ghana, in Sierra Leone, in many places in West Africa. And after, nothing at all. And now it's coming back again, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
But in the meantime, this big gap has not been addressed. So we don't really know where we're at anymore.
No.
Because the fishing sector, as you're the expert in this, but from my own observations, has changed massively. It has changed within a context, an international context that I believe has changed also massively. Talking about the Gulf of Guinea, which is the area I'm more aware of, you have a lot of forum like security architectures that discuss everything, improving policing at sea. If we're talking about the implementation of the law at sea, but actually, where are we at now? What's the data? I can give you a few figures for a navy or two, but how many females are now in the African maritime sector in that region? Who are they? Who are the big players? How can we, with our research, bring to the light of policymakers? I think, the research that needs to be done is the question.
Thank you, Sophie. So I open the floor to questions now. I don't know if you collected questions. No. So is anyone has a question? Ellen, Daisy, Jennifer, Alex, Kirian, Jinda. So we have a questions. Okay, so we want to reply to the question of Ellen. Bonnie, you want to?
Thank you, Helen, for that question on whether or not there are incentives in place to encourage women into positions within these sectors, given the challenges and discrimination they can face. I was just thinking, just in the short interactions between Sophie and Pierre just now, and Pascaline, on whether or not there is a very noticeable difference in the African experience and also the Asian, which is the one that I tend to focus on more. I think there could be a large discrepancy because I think for ASEAN, I do not know of any regional initiative. I mean, as of late, right? I mean, the ASEAN Declaration for the Protection of Migrant Fishers that just came out last year. And that was considered quite monumental because I don't think they had done that before. So I think for me, this kind of goes back to Helen's questions in terms of, well, I think in terms of these regional intergovernment initiatives for the areas that I work on, I don't know. I know that in terms of there's some voluntary corporate initiatives to get, more women into seafaring. And that is done under EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion. So that is new. I think there's the problems that we know about, like lack of role models. So, a lot of times, people don't even know it's a career path that's available for a lot of female graduates, for instance. I'm also thinking of sometimes well-intended advocacy could potentially, build on, perpetuate this stereotype that fishing is a male-dominated sector, right? With no possibility of woman participation. There's a very active campaign to get fishers communication rights at sea. And the slogan that they settled on was no Wi-Fi, no wife, I've always been quite intrigued by that slogan because it rhymes, it's short and it's catchy. But at the same time, it builds on this idea that fishing is all male, right? So I think a lot of times we need to be a bit nuanced about how we don't inadvertently create stereotypes that can persist without addressing all the things that we just talked about in this panel so far.
Thank you. Sophie, Pascaline, you want to add something?
Pascaline, I'll translate for you if you need to. Je vais traduire, Pascaline, si tu veux.
Ok, d'accord. Ok, d'accord.
Peut-être
Les-
nous parler de l'expérience de l'Afrique de l'Ouest.
Oui, en Afrique de l'Ouest, il y a beaucoup de challenges que les femmes rencontrent. Mais si nous prenons par exemple les emplois comme marin à bord et tout, ce n'est pas très développé en Afrique de l'Ouest, mais c'est plus développé en Afrique de l'Est. Et ces marins-là travaillent genre, à bord des compagnies, des navires appartenant aux grandes compagnies maritimes. Et c'est plus à l'extérieur qu'elles rencontrent des cas d'agression sexuelle à bord des navires. Mais en Afrique de l'Est,
Pascaline is saying that there are many challenges for women in West Africa, maritime sector, and they seem to, if I understood correctly, si j'ai bien compris, there are more women working in East Africa and less, particularly in the fishing sector in West Africa and the merchant navies.
exactement. Et en Afrique de l'Est et tout, genre, si on prend par exemple le cas du Bénin ou du Togo également, souvent on a ces genres d'agressions et tout. Les femmes sont souvent victimes lorsqu'elles sont dans les administrations. Donc ce n'est pas forcément à bord des navires. Donc c'est plus du côté administratif. Ou des fois, elles n'ont pas accès également à certains postes.
Yes. So Pascaline is pointing out to the fact that a lot of assaults, sexual assaults are taking place, some at sea, but quite a lot as well in the maritime administration on land, and begs the question as to what can be done. Quelles sont les propositions dans ce cas-là que tu as, Pascaline?
Je pense qu'il faudrait sensibiliser parce que c'est plus, ce n'est pas uniquement les femmes qui sont prises en compte, c'est également les hommes. Parce qu'il faudrait sensibiliser également les hommes sur ce qu'il ne faut pas faire, ce qu'il faut faire également pour promouvoir l'évolution des femmes. Et il faut également aussi qu'on puisse donner l'opportunité aux femmes d'atteindre les sphères, disons, le pouvoir décisionnaire pour mettre en place des lois, également, si je peux le dire ainsi, qui, pas privilégient, mais qui offrent des opportunités un peu aux femmes dans le secteur.
Okay, so Pascaline is basically stressing the importance of awareness, not just for women, but also for men, as to what is acceptable, what isn't. The second comment focuses on getting more role models, more women up the hierarchy. Is basically you know, that would be a way forward, leading by example, and that's a way forward, I suppose, Pascaline. C'est ça, n'est-ce pas?
Oui, exactement.
Dans la hiérarchie. And I think the comment, if I may interject at this point, the comment that you're saying is that this, you know, you have a lot more women are joining forces, or a lot more women are joining sectors, but when it comes to the top jobs, the pyramid just narrows down. Recently, the French Navy, for example, appointed a captain of a large frigate. First time ever that a female captain was appointed as a pasha, commander of a large, a very powerful frigate. There are challenges, and I think if I can, you know, lead on with my own perspective here, is the idea of, there's a lot of policies already. So for me, the key is research. If we can't argue cases to enforce those policies and put the spotlight on these issues, which regionally it's going to be really hard. Role models, so important. You have no idea how, you know, the fact that more women are, for example, sailing, and if you talk about the yachting industry as a leisure activity, which is a very large sector, by the way, in the blue economy, you know, having females that go around the world and inspire young women is absolutely critical. So you're having, I follow your blogs, your posts on Maritime Africa. Brilliant. You see a lot of women. You follow. You see all of this is going on. If one follows the Facebook page of the French Navy, of the UK Navy, there's a lot of examples of women. Does this mean that problems don't continue to exist? Well, no, actually, it still means that there are many challenges grassroots level, and we need to try and eradicate these issues.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sophie. I don't know what time I'm checking. Oh, yes. So, okay. So it's time to, not to wrap up because it will be too long, but just to thank you, all of you. Okay. And Pascaline, Bonnie, of course, Leila, and Sophie. And I think we will have another Blue Horizon event in about a month's time. So we'll send email around, and we can join together the next seminar. So thanks a lot, everybody, and see you for the next at the next event. Thanks a lot. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye bye.